Strategy and tactics. Strategy and tactics are what you use to attack and get after your opponent when you're in any type of sport. Now, I'm going to describe a strategy as the overall plan and a tactic as the movements and skills that we use within the plan. Now, of course, strategy is going to change in wrestling or probably in most other sports based on the score, right? If the score is 3-1, I have a certain strategy, or if it's 1-3, I have another strategy. It's going to change based on the time. If there's 30 seconds left and I'm winning 3-1, it's going to be a different strategy versus 1-3 with 15 seconds left. I'm down with 15 seconds to go and I'm losing by 2 points. So that, can you guys get a sense of what we're going to be talking about here? All right, that's the setup, if you will. If you go to the last presentation, there's a talk about setups, basically setting the table so that everyone can eat, which is a metaphor for get ready, here it comes. So what do we got here? Strategy. What is strategy? What's the point of it, and how can it affect my ability to achieve in sport and or specifically in wrestling? If you have a strategy and the strategy is flexible, we talked about flexibility on one of the other videos here. If the strategy is in place and you are going to use a strategy based on different options that occur in the match, now you have pre-planned what you want to do, and you have thought about, the opponent may do this, the opponent may do that, and what it really does is it gives you a sense of calm. So if something happens during the match, you don't panic. And that's I had a former wrestler, I won't shout out her name right now because I didn't get permission to use her name, and she's still competing, which is kind of the bigger point. She explained to me once, I asked her, I'm just like, man, what's going on out there? What are you thinking about when you go out there? And what were you she was losing. What were you thinking about when you were down 3-1 with 10 seconds to go? She's just like, I never panic. And at that time, she was a high school athlete. She was like 16 years old. And I was like, holy cow, I've never heard anything like that out of anyone's mouth, especially when they're a 16-year-old. Nonetheless, she had, developed plans for her matches. And I'm just like, wow, I had never been taught that before. But part of her training was, I never panic during the ongoings of a match, because I always feel like I have an opportunity, an idea in my mind that whatever happens, I'm going to figure it out. That is part of a strategy. Part of a strategy, and maybe you can think about this a little bit, is, okay, how can I put myself in a position where I always feel confident? And then you design a training program that, is going to elicit that response. Now, you probably, if you're wrestling for someone, i.e. a wrestling coach and or a university and or a high school team, there is a lot of things that entity or organization is actually going to do for you. What can you do for yourself, and what can your coach do for you? Your coach can put you in these sort of scenarios, and then this just happened with a friend of mine. He runs the Overtime School of Wrestling in Naperville, Illinois. Essentially what he did, he put him in different situations, and I do this too, but I thought it was unique because he and I both, Kerry Bowman's is his name, we both came from the Olympic Training Center in Colorado Springs. We were on that first resident team back in 1997. Cutting right through the chase, though, we were both kind of trained the same way. So what he was doing, he was just putting his athletes down 3-1. And then it was a 30-second goal. And then he would switch the score, so now the wrestler was either winning or losing 1-3. So they would just keep switching roles for almost a 5 or 6 minute stretch. What it was designed to do was teach the athletes how to have a strategy based on what the time was and what the score was. And that's when I say your coach can kind of put you in those scenarios so that you understand what you should be doing, when you should be doing it, and why you should be doing it. Just as a real quick, as an aside to that, in those particular moments, I need to maybe have a 2 or 3 point skill. I need to have a strategy to take the person down to their back if I'm losing. If I'm winning, I need to understand how to, specifically wrestling movements, I need to understand how to get my specific tie. Maybe it's an underhook with a wrist and I got my head position. Maybe it's a 2-on-1 with my head position. Maybe it's continuously faking so I make the opponent attack me based on my movement pattern. So if they attack when I want them to attack, it's a lot easier to counter. But can you see how that strategy plays into how your coach can affect it? And if that is not happening in your wrestling room with your coach, you could do this. And I did this all the time. Man, I'll just as an aside, I'll give you another aside. Sometimes I would be bored in practice because my skill level was a lot different than everybody else's. So I would make games, and I suggest this sometimes to the best wrestlers in the room, or kids that are actually getting bored and practice student athletes that feel like, you know, I'm better than everybody in this room. How can I get better? You need to challenge yourself. Quickly back to the story that I was going to give you. I would make the scores, you know, 6-1, 7-1, 8-1, 9-1. So I would handicap the matches so that I would have to, you know, do something offensively to get out, or I would make it go the other way. I would make them win in 21-0. Or 1-0, or I'd be winning 21-0, or whatever. I would just make up all these different scenarios, so I would have to create a different strategy in my mind. So I'd put a lot of pressure on myself to do X, Y, and Z. If that isn't happening with your coach, and coach isn't giving you that sort of scenario, then of course you can do it for yourself in practice, and that's just challenging yourself so that you can get really, really good at doing what you're doing, or what you want to do in practice. So strategy, quickly, is something that you have planned prior to, and it needs to be flexible. I gave you all those scenarios where the scores kept changing, because inevitably sometimes in your matches, man, you will be up or down in score, and then just like that, it can change, right? Have you ever had this happen where you've been winning 3-0 and all of a sudden it's 3-3? Rather than panicking, get nervous and super duper anxious, and now your muscles are so tight it's very difficult for you to move. You know, you already planned for that. You know, my strategy when the score is 3-3 is to do this, and you've gone over all of these things in your mind. You know, I talked about self-talk and imagery earlier. Outside of the wrestling room, you could probably spend 15-20 minutes a day, maybe 5 minutes at 3 times a day equals 15 minutes, or however elaborate you want to get it, going through, you know, subsets of different scenarios. So you're planning this strategy in your mind, so when it comes up, you react and you respond. Flip over the other side. If you do not plan for that type of environment, now when you're in that environment, there's a higher likely that you may actually panic, and you may get a little bit stressed out, and it may overwhelm you. I'm suggesting that if you have strategies built into your training, either with your coach or with yourself, you now have a comfortable feeling when you're out there, because it doesn't matter what the score is, because, you know, my strategy for this scenario is this, and my strategy for that scenario is that. Tactics. The tactic is what you actually do with the strategy, right? So I didn't mention it much, but I've been talking about it throughout. If the score is 3-1, this is the tactic that I actually do within the overall strategy to get the score to where I need it to be. If I'm winning 3-1, these are the tactics that I'm actually going to use. Specific movement patterns, specific execution of feints and fakes and setups, and technical skills that I use. Now, if you know technical skills, that's probably which to me, technical skills includes the mental game, the physical game, and then the strategy. Once you kind of master those concepts, sport, life, and wrestling become very easy. So it takes a little bit of time on your part. Just sit down and think about it. You know, outside of the wrestling room, maybe you're keeping a journal and something like that, and maybe you're asking your coach questions so that you can develop the strategy and the tactics to go along with that strategy. So if you're in scenario A, 3-1, you know what to do. If you're in scenario B, 1-3, you know what to do. You're in scenario D, I'm in the quarterfinals of the senior national tournament, or the junior world tournament, or the Olympic games. How do I handle my emotions, so to speak? You need to have a strategy there too. I talked, you know, the first, let's say 7 or 8 minutes, I just talked about strategy within the competition of a particular match. What is your strategy and your tactics in between rounds? You need to probably have some type of game plan for that too. Essentially, and in essence, there needs to be a strategy and or a plan and or specific actions that you're going to do, and you need to have thought about them prior to the event or the competition happening. And that goes on with planning and goals and everything else. If you have done all these things prior to, guess what starts to happen? Believe me, your distress level goes way down. It stays at a level that is where it would be with confidence. It stays away from that panic mode, where you change it over to excitement, because you've gone through a bunch of different scenarios in your hand. You have strategy for this, you've got a strategy for that, and you feel comfortable and you feel confident with those. Strategy and tactics. Remember, you can find out more information like this at Coach Shannon Talks on YouTube.com. Coach Shannon.